Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today I actually wanted to do a transfer video before I actually went with my team selection this week because I was a little bit at odds with what my plans are, and I think it actually is quite congruent with a lot of managers who have decisions to make this week, especially those who don't presently have FODEN and SAKA in their teams, and also those managers who might be looking for a defender transfer and also looking to optimize for the next few weeks, especially since they have a lot of bad fixtures this week. Just recapping Game Week 12, of course, I had a wonderful week. It's not over, of course. We do have the Fulham game later, and I could obviously drop a little bit in rank due to Mitrovic, but I still have Andreas to play. So hopefully a good week ahead. And a decent green arrow that would probably land me around 35k in the world. Currently, I'm around 26,000. I'm not hoping too much. I do think Mitrovic will probably score, but best case scenario, I'd probably stay around 25,000 in the world if Andreas does something well. So that's the scenario with my team. I obviously did go into a threemium structure. So as you can see here with Salah and Kane, not exactly the absolute best with the captaincy and the vice captaincy. They both didn't pop off. That wasn't necessarily something we expected. I think I definitely expected something from Salah, but my defense obviously carried me this week, and that was the plan really last week when we brought Webster in. Trossard was actually a transfer that I was telling a lot of managers to not go into last week because I just wasn't really that impressed with him the last 2 weeks. Obviously, he had chances, so did Welbeck specifically, but yeah, not really happy with my Brighton attacking assets. Actually, still quite happy with the look of their defense. I don't really think much has changed substantially with how we should evaluate them as a defensive team. But as an attack, still probably not as high as we should have in the early parts of the season. So for me, Trossard is an immediate transfer out, not necessarily this week, but just one to think about for the future. Around his price range, I have an option like Rashford in the future, so that's game week 14, I would say, and beyond, probably quite interesting. I do think the Chelsea game will be a little bit more defensive, so after that, I do think Rashford has really good fixtures, even though they're not the cleanest when you compare them to City and Arsenal's. So that's an option too. At the same time, of course, I am featuring a lot of poor defenders for Game Week 13, so I do need something to cover the blank. So a little bit of a test to see how poor my bench is for Game Week 13 is just to really see what my Game Week 12 blank Game Week team would be in Game Week 13. A lot of bad matchups here. And if you look at the highlighted players here, I mean, it clearly shows that I have 4 to 5 problem points. I would say I am forced to play Pope, so he's not really going to be a problem point. I did anticipate, obviously, this fixture being tough in the future. But Webster, Schär, Neco Williams, and Trossard, these are all playing players that I really don't want to have in my team for this week. Webster seems like a bit of a keep because Brighton actually have some pretty good fixtures heading towards 16, with the exception to the Chelsea and Man City game, so I do want to keep him there. It also allows my defense to be relatively flexible. Triple Newcastle defense is probably something that I'm not going to be working with in the future, and I've banked in a sort of transfer value point from Schär, so I can happily move away from him into someone like Ben White, and that's an option. Neco Williams, I simply don't want to play, but he's also very cheap, so I don't really want to waste a transfer on him because there's no comparison and no upgrades really because I have 0.0 in the bank. As far as Trossard, he does seem like the player to move onto if I want to opt for some sort of FODEN or SAKA structure. And I think ideally for all us FPL managers, you want to have both of these players, both FODEN and SAKA in your teams heading towards Game Week 16. Potentially, I could live away from them if I go for some Liverpool forward options, but it's clearly going to be a sticking point with my team, and those are the issues at present. So that's sort of the situation with my bench. I'm probably looking to move on a few of those players that I've mentioned, but ideally, if I bring back the City and Arsenal players, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have Haaland, Martinelli, and Cancelo. Obviously, great upgrades to players like Trossard versus City, players like Webster versus City, and then also Neco Williams versus Liverpool. I still have 2 issues, right? I have, or arguably 3 this week. Solanke versus West Ham doesn't seem very appealing. West Ham have actually been very, very good from a defensive point of view. Andreas versus Leeds actually seems quite tempting to play. I think he's not really a problem point for now. And then you've got Schär versus Tottenham, where I have the triple Newcastle defense. So my plans really is option 1, to make a safe and simple transfer into someone like Ben White. So with Ben White here, what he actually provides is someone who's a 4.5 Arsenal defender. And we actually have a lot of value from White. I think he's probably the cheapest Arsenal defender that you can get that's actually nailed. When you compare to Saliba and Gabriel, who are both at 5.1, yes, obviously they have a little bit more of an attacking edge towards them. White doesn't seem to be someone who really looks for assists. If you actually look at his assist in recent games, it was actually just the layoff to Partey, who scored an absolute banger. White doesn't seem like a very appealing option from the attacking point of view, but Arsenal have been very consistent, even at getting clean sheets away from home. So that's kind of the positive point here that I would say is why I'd like to bring in White. It also allows me to move away from Schär, as opposed to move away from Trippier into someone like Gabriel or even Saliba, who I might actually prefer just a touch more. So the issue here, of course, is Saliba has 4 yellow cards, so that's not really an option. And then I think with Gabriel, I'd just like to gamble with Trippier because Trippier's been so consistent. I can't really see the point of moving him out of my team. White therefore has to come in if I'm to play this sort of defensive transfer and make sure that my team is a little bit more well-rounded and kind of anticipate a very poor game week 12, just simply because I have Andreas and Solanke, and a lot of people will have Foden and Saka and even Darwin instead, who might be a little bit more interesting than any of the options here that I have in my team. The alternative route is to actually go into Darwin from Kane, and this is also going to be a one free transfer move, allowing me to free up money for next week, where I can either make a decision between Foden and Saka. Saka clearly has the better game versus Nottingham Forest, and then Foden just has a cleaner run, right? He doesn't have that game versus Chelsea, but I must say, of course, that the Chelsea-Arsenal games as of late have been very high scoring, and, you know, inevitably there's probably going to be a penalty where maybe Saka could benefit as the penalty taker, so that's what you have to think about. If we look at the rest of the team, though, of course, Darwin versus Kane, just that simple matchup, swapping him out. Even though I still have a lot of problem points in my team, I do think Darwin actually has a better fixture matchup than Kane. Newcastle, as I've been saying, is a very, very solid defense, and it probably is a little bit more optimal to go for someone like Darwin this week and free up the funds. But what I actually like about the Darwin move is it actually does allow me to go for a hit, and that's either for Foden or Saka. My preferred move is to go into Foden because he simply has that home game versus Brighton, and I do think that the City team is completely levels above this Brighton team, even though Brighton have shown to be a very, very reasonable defense. And that's the kind of thing that's in my head, especially with Southampton actually playing quite well in recent memory versus Arsenal. Yes, of course, it's a completely new look Arsenal team, but I do think Hasenhüttl at times has gotten very consistent performances versus Arsenal. And away from home, I do think that the matchup actually does favor Foden if you're to bring him in game week 13. The issue with Saka, of course, is that he probably has the absolute best fixture between Foden and Saka in game week 14, where he gets to play Nottingham Forest. The issue with that, though, is he does have Chelsea right after that. But, of course, if we cast our minds back to previous North London derbies and how we also anticipate the match to be, I do think Saka has good chances as well scoring versus Chelsea, especially as the penalty taker of this Arsenal team. So that's what's in my mind. But the thing about Foden and the upside with Foden is he simply has been the better player in open field. He's also just been a little bit more clinical this season. I think part of that, too, is because he plays so well with Haaland. He's also looked to make a lot of runs as the last man in behind, as opposed to sort of simply playing out wide and playing that sort of Grealish-like role, which is very supportive for the team, but not necessarily very beneficial for someone who's looking to cut inside and score. So Foden, in this season, in my opinion, has actually stepped up when it comes to trying to assume attacking positions, and therefore Foden, for me, is the more interesting transfer this week, if I am to take the hit. So that's going to be option 2 for this week. Let me know what you guys think about the transfers. I do think, of course, Foden and Saka is one thing to think about. Whether I'm going for Darwin is one thing to think about too, because I do think I'd only really go for the Darwin move if I'm supposed to make the hit for Foden and Saka. Alternatively, if you prefer that move, like such as going for Ben White, do let me know in the comment section. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys very shortly.